Okay, Shalom Aleichem. As usual, it's a schus to share Torah with LPI, with the Lost Princess Initiative, under the spiritual guidance of Rav Yaakov Klein, who just in a year alone has done an amount that will take historians years to describe. And so it's really a schus to share Torah with good friends, on the platform of a good friend. And Be'ezras Hashem, the words of the tzaddikim should awaken our own hearts, awaken the sleeping heart of the world, and enable us to come just a little bit closer to a personal as well as a collective redemption. Now, the Meor Einayim has a remarkable teaching which really doesn't need any introduction and doesn't need any follow-up. The teaching itself, these few words, contain within them vistas of experience, and truth be told, if a person were capable of drawing down this insight into their minds on a regular basis, in the moment that they find themselves in, it would be enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the words and simply try and explain simply what they might mean for us in 2021. The Meor Einayim says as follows in Parshas Ha'azinu: when a person falls from their spiritual standing, when a person falls down from the level that they were at, Nikra Churban Beis HaMikdash, it's referred to as the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. There was a collective destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, just as there was a collective Beis HaMikdash. And there is also a particular individualized Beis HaMikdash within each and every one of us, as Rabbi Menachem of Breslov teaches us that the Beis HaMikdash is das, that when a person is able to align themselves and pay attention to the moment that they find themselves in, that is considered the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, their particular stone, which is in truth an entire reality within the mind. When a person falls down from where they were at, so it's considered the destruction of their own personal temple. And a person needs, even specifically in a time where they fall away from their previous spiritual standing, and a person needs to ensure that they move towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even in that place, specifically in that place that they find themselves right now, specifically in that fallenness. They need to strengthen themselves, gird themselves with a spiritual brazenness that Rabbi Nachman teaches us so deeply about, and to move towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that specific place. And not only does a person have to persevere when they fall, they have to see the spiritual worship that they engage in the fall as if it is the same value, because in truth it is the same value as that time where they were standing in supernal bliss, and that time of elevated and expansive consciousness. V'zehu nikra zeicher lemikdash. And this is what is referred to as a remembrance of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what the Meor Einayim is showing us is something so fundamental to the light of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, but something so revolutionary to the consciousness of the regular thinking individual. It's as follows. Typically, a person assumes that the purpose of spirituality, the purpose of Avodas Hashem, is the hierarchical growth upon the rungs of the ladder of spirituality. So I go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 until I eventually perfect the ladder and I can reach up and touch perfection. That's the typical, almost immature conception of what Avodas Hashem means. That the goal is to get higher, the goal is to always move further and further ahead, and therefore, what one intuits from that notion is that anytime I move a step back, or anytime that there's a degradation in my spiritual activity, or my attention, or my calmness, or my mindfulness, or my shalom bayis, or the shalom that I have with myself, or the midos tovos that I have, or dealing with anxiety, or fighting against kfira and throwing myself into emunah, that anytime I fall away from that, a person feels like I'm a lo yitzlach, I'm losing, I'm no longer climbing the ladder, and therefore I find myself in a place of desperation and darkness. Now, there is a trend, whether it's in Musar or whether other shitos, even in Chassidus one finds a trend, that says, even though you've fallen, nevertheless, the purpose of the fall is to get back up and to move forward. This is what is referred to in seforim hakedoshim, in particular the writings of the Baal Tanya, as a darga of iskafia, of suppressing darkness. Yes, there's darkness in my life, but I have to suppress it. I fell, but I have to get up the next moment and move forward, because the tachlis is to always move forward. And that's obviously true. But there's another chiddush that the Meor Einayim is describing here, which is something that is revealed in particular in the writings of Rebbe Menachem, the Menachem Levei Makar Chachma, that it's not enough to look at the fall as a prerequisite for moving forward, as if the fall is a b'diavad, and the fall is a secondary status of service of God, and now I find myself stuck in darkness, but that darkness can lead me to light. But what the Meor Einayim is saying is that the darkness itself is light. That in that moment, in the churban of the Beis HaMikdash, before the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, if we sift through the rubble of our experience, if we look amongst the broken shards of what we thought was our spiritual standing, what we'll come to find is the irreducible trace of Kedusha, the irreducible trace of those Mochen de Gadlus that were there, that can still be found within any experience. Because in truth, while on one level we have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with this hierarchical ascent upwards at every moment, and anytime a person falls, they have to be oisek and tshuva, but from the perspective of Shabbos, from the perspective of Yichud Hashem, from the perspective of that Or Shivas Yimei Bereshis, of that light of redemption that drips into existence at every moment, if we open our eyes deeply enough to pierce through the veil of experience, what we come to find is that wherever we are, Hashem is there with us. Whether I've fallen, whether I've gone up, whether I'm right, whether I'm left, whether I'm down, whether I'm broken, whether I'm built, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there for me all the same. There's a Maisa that the Goyin and the Tzaddik, Rav Yitzhok Meyer Morgenstern Shlita, brings down a number of times, that he experienced with one of his mashpi'im, one of his tzaddikim, the Krechnefer Rebbe, Zchusi Hagan Aleinu, that the Rebbe, when the Rebbe was young, when Rav Meyer was young, he came to the Krechnefer Rebbe complaining about moichen dekatnus, complaining about constricted consciousness, complaining about a fallen state. And again, moichen dekatnus is a concept that's expressed in the Arizal, in the Zohar Kadosh, in the Kavanos, it's everywhere. And what his Rebbe said to him was, who told you there was such a concept as moichen dekatnus? Whoever told you there was such a thing as constricted consciousness? Because in truth, constricted consciousness, the Rebbe explains, is also a form of divine consciousness. It's a small, diminished state, but nevertheless, a person is connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu then and there. There's nothing that we can do that gets HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of our lives. There's nothing that we can experience that can take away the possibility of cleaving to the infinite that is present and saturating every single experience. And if we're able to cultivate an awareness of this idea, then bein kach ubein kach, when we're up, we serve Hashem. When we're down, we serve Hashem. When we have hope, we serve Hashem. When we feel hopeless, we serve Hashem. And ultimately, we come to realize that even in the loss of hope, even in the katnus, even in the chorban beis hamikdash, ein shem yesh ba'olam klal. In truth, there's absolutely no loss of hope whatsoever, and the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu persists in spite of our greatest efforts to try and hide it sometimes.